Along about December of 2003, once we had pretty much greenlit the show, we started putting down into a timeline. The process that we came up with was we would kind of build it in little baby steps. First, we would get the helm completed. Then we would do the decks to complete out the command module, which included the captain's chair and the helmsman station. We hope to get that part done by January of 2004. Jim would then detail all that, and then I would start on the communication station at my house in my garage. Before we started the construction on the bridge, we knew that we needed to do a couple of green screen tests. These tests were for set extensions used at the Congo crash and for the hallway sections, to kind of extend them to make them look bigger than they really were. So we gave the green screen a fresh coat of paint. I built some fake rocks. We made a small section of Starship corridor space in my garage, and we were able to shoot the test. We knew that we needed to test all three uniform colors against the green screen to see if they would work out. I knew that Jim and Holly would be in the test, but I knew that we needed a third person to wear the third color. Cody had been helping us out a little bit, and he definitely had that Starfleet look, and that would end up being his audition for the show. Our original plans were to complete the command module at Jim's house, and then we would need to figure out, how long it's going to take to build a station. Our prototype station was going to be the communication station. At that time, we had no idea how to build it. We had some of the plans that are available on the internet, the McMaster plans and the Starfleet manuals, but we quickly realized that those plans, there was a serious amount of artistic license taking in them, and that they couldn't be counted on to mathematically come out correctly. When we started drawing our plans, it proved to be more difficult than we thought. The bridge design is a 20-sided shape, each piece of the pie being 18 degrees of a circle. Our plan for building the bridge was that we would build the deck first, and then we would build the console part, which is the part where the buttons are. And then once we got those done, we'd build the second console so that we had a pair, which would create a station, and then I would build the upper display, which would go on top of it. That worked pretty good for the most part. Once I finished building the upper display, I would make sure that it got all primered, and then I would send it over to Jim's house. Once we figured out how long it would take to build that station, then we kind of stair-stepped it out between the first of the year up until July, when we knew we were going to start filming.
Well, when I found out we were building the full bridge, it didn't hit me how big this thing was and how complicated and how big a project it really is to build a bridge. No, that didn't hit me until far, far later.
By April of 2004, we had completed the communication station and decided to do a camera test. Our goal was to confirm that we were using the correct colors on the bridge and to check the colors of our custom dyed fabrics. Matt Bellemere had completed the circuit boards for the blinking lights, and we were concerned that the panel lights might not be bright enough under the stage lights. This proved not to be a problem.
It didn't hit me until we assembled the test footage in my living room. Well, when we got it all put in there and squeaked it in and moved the fans and got everything assembled, and I went upstairs to look down on it, I just realized that the living room was dominated by this big piece of Star Trek, and it was really cool.
We had looked for help building the bridge in several different places. Luckily for us, the Starfleet group, the USS Archangel, volunteered to do the decks for us. This proved to be invaluable for us because it allowed me to be working on the consoles and a lot of the stuff that required a lot of detail work, and it allowed them to participate in the Exeter project. Soon after we started constructing the bridge set, we realized that we were going to have a probably 35 by 35 foot building.
When we were trying to decide where we were going to shoot this movie, I just figured, well, we're going to find a warehouse space or whatever. But Joel really wanted to do it at Austin Studios.
I'd read an article or something like that in one of the local papers about the film industry here, and then they had talked about Austin Studios. So I put together an email that talked about our success on the web and how we were going, and that we were very likely going to be able to do another show. Suzanne Quinn of Austin Studios responded a couple of weeks after that. We set up a meeting where we discussed, our project and our needs, and she thought at that point that we were a good fit for them.
I didn't think it was going to be affordable to us, but once we talked to them, and they had told us that they liked to work with local groups and they could make it affordable to us. It seemed like it could really be possible. And when we first talked to them, it sounded like it was going to be a lot cheaper than it ended up being. But it was still very affordable.
We kind of figured that it was a really good place to do the show. You know, the amount was enough to scare you, but not enough to scare you off.
Yeah, we went down to Austin Studios after we had met with them a few times, and Suzanne Quinn had all the paperwork drawn up, and we signed the lease agreement so we would be able to move in there.
While we were in the meeting, she talked about that any of the productions have this synergy that goes between the different productions that are there, that you'll be able to draw off the experience from some of the other people, especially some of the pros that know that you're a fan film or that know that you're an independent feature. They'll come over onto your area and your space and just check out to see what you've got going on. We were originally supposed to move into Austin Studios on July the 4th weekend. Because we were so far behind, Jim and I had decided that we would see if there was room available for us to move into Austin Studios early. Luckily there was. It was going to cost us a little bit more money, but because it would allow us to have a permanent home for us to set everything up and start building it, we thought it was pretty important to go ahead and move in early there.
On moving day to Austin Studios, we rented a U-Haul truck and loaded up all the set pieces we had and drove down there. And the U-Haul truck was pretty big, but you drive inside this 14,000 square foot hangar where the stage was, and all of a sudden it just doesn't look that big. And we unloaded our pieces and they all fitted in this one little corner of it, and we were like, wow, how are we going to fill up this whole space? But we made use of the whole building by the time we got done, so we had no trouble using that stage.
Moving day, it had to be planned like moving your house, because we really had 3 truckloads of stuff at that point. We had stuff at my house, we had stuff at Jim's house. Holly, who plays Commander Harris, we had her garage filled full of stuff at that point. So we had to gather up all this stuff and get it out there.
The abstract of, oh, well, we'll be doing the filming in a hangar goes away, and you realize how big a hangar for planes really is. And it was really nice to have that space.
When we first started laying out the deck platforms for the bridge, I think the first thing we did was we put the platforms down in a circle where we thought we were going to want it. The thing's 35 feet across or something, which you don't realize it's going to be that big when you're just building a single piece at a time in your garage. So it took up a good amount of that hangar, and it was cool to actually be able to start envisioning, this is where the bridge is going to be. We've got the circle here, and can walk into the middle of the circle and kind of start to imagine yourself being there.
When we walked into the studios and we saw the size of the studio and how much room we could work with, it felt like somebody took a rock off my chest. We set up a work area, we set up a painting area, we set up a costume changing area. First thing we set up was the bridge. And after the bridge was set up, we still had a lot of room.
I started setting up the time-lapse camera while Jim finished moving the last pieces of the bridge. After moving 2 pickup truck loads of tools and lumber from my garage, I started setting up the workshop area. Jim worked on the bridge, first deciding where it would be set up in the hangar and then assembling the captain's chair. Sunday was spent bolting the decks and stations into place. It was exciting to see the pieces of the bridge assembled for the first time. By the end of the weekend, we had everything in position and bolted together. One of the comm consoles had been dropped in the move and needed to be repaired. Jim carefully hammered the pieces into place and applied a thick coat of Bondo to cover the damage. So once we'd all gotten moved in and settled in, everyone went home. We'd had a very hard day on the 19th. I roll into Austin Studios around 8 o'clock in the morning. I wheeled open the doors, and it's a very large, very empty place because it's just me, and that's it. There were some people that were supposed to get there after work, but that was, 8 hours away from then. So I knew we needed more workers, so I asked Suzanne if there was anyone else who could help us. She sent over several interns. One of them was Chris, who had never done set construction before, but seemed to have a knack for it. He joined our crew and ended up helping us throughout the entire production. It was our hope that we would have people that would want to work on a production that was of a decent sized budget, but we just never were able to get connected with those people, which was a little bit frustrating. Our original plan before we moved into Austin Studios was to have the bridge completely done, except for just, the last little bit of tweaking out the lights and touching up the paint and that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, because it was such a hard build for us, we only had communications and science stations completed before we moved into the hangar. The carpentry on the 2 consoles of Cuddy's defense station were built in my garage. And I had most of those things built, what we called the hard construction on them, which was, putting the boards together. They were primered and ready for painting when we moved in.
The first thing we did as soon as we moved into Austin Studios was to try to get the bridge assembled. There were some challenges, and as far as the entire bridge wasn't completed. And so we were able to lay the thing out. We were able to get the command module and the comm station and the science station and a few other pieces set up. And we were able to really be able to visualize where this thing was going to go. Then over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we continued to build onto the bridge set. And sometimes we would have to set pieces up, and if they didn't fit quite right, take them back down, do little adjustments on them, bring them back up.
Did you guys move in Friday?
Saturday.
Okay, 1, 2, day 3. Day 5.
It is day 5 already?
Because it's Wednesday.
Holy crap-a-moles. I don't want to hear that. By the end of the first week, I was nervous because I was afraid it was going to take at least 6 weeks to complete the remaining stations, but we only had 4 weeks. Even scarier, in addition to the bridge, we still needed the briefing room, the corridors, sick bay, the brig, and the engineering room for the Congo. Days clicked by, we did kind of get a good little crew that would come in the evenings and help us out in that 2-week period prior to when filming started. It was my job to get the main carpentry done, and then let the volunteers do the finishing and the painting. The first stations we completed were defense and environmental. During the first week, I also worked on the railings for the bridge, the 2 half stations, and the turbolift door assembly, while Martin began working on the turbolift interior. The following week, he started working on the briefing room, while Chris started spackling the main viewer and painting the bridge rails red. Some of the people that came to help, Cody was always there, Art was there almost every single day. Matt Bellemere, the guy that created the switches to keep all the lights blinking on the set, he was there almost every day.
When I saw the magnitude of how much work had to be done and the in-depth detail that had to be done with the labor force that they had, a lot of people didn't see this thing happening. They really didn't. It was all due to Joel because he pretty much was the glue that held this project together.
We did have several volunteers that would come in the evening hours after they finished work. The only problem with that is that I had just finished a full 8-hour day in the heat, so I was pretty burned out by the time that time came around. But if it wouldn't have been for those people that would come and help, it would have been even further behind schedule.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time building the sets with Joel and with Chris and Art. Did a little bit of everything on that, cutting, painting, stapling, but everything up to the detailing and rearranging of the sets, all the way through the production.
Initially, in the early meetings, it was very much guerrilla DV mentality. It's like, oh, we're just gonna get a bunch of clip lights from Home Depot, and we're gonna, I've got this Fresnel mounted on a 2x4, like one light, and I was like, okay, we'll just get some PVC pipe and everything will be fine.
Once we got the set half built, and it just became obvious that you can't light the bridge of the Enterprise with clamp lights. It just wasn't going to be done.
But then when, I was able to go down there and see it in physical context and how big it was and how high off the ground it was, I knew that we were going to be in big trouble, and there was no way we were going to be able to light that thing with the conventions we talked about. And that's what led to Gear and going to Gear to rent the truck.
It was given to us in a message that one of the guys that works at Gear was a Star Trek fan, and they really wanted to talk to us.
Craig, the owner, is a big Star Trek fan, and I guess it got down the pipeline that, hey, we're interested in renting one of these trucks, and just agreed to cut us a deal on the equipment we needed. It ended up being a real lifesaver, because if we would have had to build the types of lighting stands and things we needed out of lumber, it would have been it would have looked like trebuchets or something, or some weird medieval film we're making or something. It wouldn't have been what we needed, which is a reliable equipment.
Again, it wasn't as affordable as we would have liked, like just about everything, but they got it cheap enough where we couldn't justify not doing it.
We rented like an economy truck they had, like a 1-ton truck. This ended up being really kind of working in our favor and being an advantage, because the way they can take a truck like that and make it affordable to rent to independent filmmakers is they put old lights on there. None of the equipment's not like you're using brand new HMIs or anything. These are old quartz instruments, old Mole Richardson Fresnels, and that's probably what the old show was shot on. Very similar anyway. So it really worked to our advantage to have the truck and those lights.
But it was a lot more money. It was a good hunk of the budget at that point. With all those lights was definitely the way to go to take this project to the next level. And shortly after they started unloading that truck and putting the lights on the set, we could tell that we'd made the right decision.
What impressed me most about the production was the different elements that came together. Scott Cummins came from Portland, Oregon. Then there's Mr. Bailey, who wrote the screenplay, who actually ended up driving down to actually help out with the production. Jim and Josh coming up with the idea, and then just all the cast, or all the crew that came together.
We actually had a lot of people that came down and drove from states away from here. One of them was Richard Day. He came in from Oklahoma, I believe. He was a very hard worker. He was so happy to be there and so impressed by the whole crew that was there. So it was really a fun time for him and a fun time for us for being there.
And we walked in that little side door, and the first thing I saw was the back of the bridge. And as we walked around it, my eyes just went wild, and I was going, "Oh, look, this is the bridge." And she asked me how I liked it, and I thought it was just wonderful. It was just an exciting moment, because there was the bridge of the Enterprise, and it looked so good. And I knew at that point that this was going to be a really good quality production.
Great, thank you.
It was still a struggle sometimes, because while I was working all day long and I had a lot of volunteers to help me, days would go by and it was like I wasn't getting anywhere. And here it was coming, the first day of shooting was just right around the corner. I had some help, but it really wasn't going fast enough. By mid-July, which was the beginning of the 4th week, we completed and installed the upper displays, and Martin and Jim had finished the inside of the turbo lift. Jim and his team were feverishly installing the black acrylic panels and attaching the blinking lights behind them. The lighting coves were the next step. The biggest challenge would be in front of the turbo lift, where we had to do a lot of cantilevered construction behind the set. The compound angles added to the complexity of the construction. A half-inch mistake at the main viewer could throw things off by as much as 8 inches at the turbo lift. Jim spent many hours in post-production painting out those imperfections.